At every Mass, we hear the priest say to us, "Behold the Lamb of God, behold him who takes away the sins of the world." Why? As Catholics, in our Mass, we refer to Jesus and proclaim him to be the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. Why? Because the Bible tells us to. In the Gospel of John, chapter 1, John the Baptist, not the John who wrote the Gospel, that's John the beloved disciple, John the Baptist, who is the cousin of Jesus, John the Baptist points Jesus out after his baptism and says, "Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." Why would John use such language? Is that just poetic and flowery language? How do we understand that language, and how should we hear and listen to that language and think about that language when we ourselves hear it at Mass? Well, when John the Baptist refers to Jesus as the Lamb of God, he's probably referring to two important moments from the Old Testament, from the Jewish Scriptures, Revelation as John the Baptist knew it at his time. Those two passages are the testing of Abraham in Genesis chapter 22 and the freeing of the Jewish people at the Red Sea in Exodus 14. In Genesis chapter 22, Abraham has his long-awaited son Isaac, who is now around 13 years old, and God asks Abraham to make a sacrifice of Isaac. Now, that's off-putting to us today, but to Abraham, we shouldn't judge him harshly for this, because in his day that was expected that the gods surrounding Abraham, the gods of the pagan peoples, would demand human sacrifice. So Abraham thinks this is the same, and he goes to sacrifice Isaac. There's a longer story, I'm cutting it short. But as he's going to take his son to sacrifice, Isaac kind of starts to do the math, and he's like, "Well, Dad, we have fire, we have wood, we have a knife, but where's the sacrifice?" And imagine how Abraham must have gotten a gut punch in that moment. Abraham says to his son Isaac, "God will provide the lamb." And then they see in the bushes a ram who's caught there by his horns. And they sacrifice that ram instead because God tells Abraham to spare Isaac, his only beloved son. Important words there, right? So John the Baptist certainly thinking about Genesis chapter 22. Also thinking about Exodus and the story of the Exodus. Now, in the Exodus, in the final time that Moses and the Jewish people are in Egypt, God says that he will show his power against the Egyptian by killing their firstborn children. For the Jewish people to be saved, they must sacrifice a lamb, putting its blood on their doorposts and eating its roasted flesh. This is the Passover. You might hear still of Passover that the Jews who have not followed Jesus still practice today. And so the Passover lamb was an important thing to the Jewish people at John the Baptist's day. So to look at Jesus, to call him out of the crowd and say, "Behold the Lamb of God, behold him who takes away the sin of the world," that's a specific meaning to what John the Baptist is doing. So we look at Jesus in this way as the fulfillment of many things from the Old Testament. He fulfills the sacrifice that Abraham was first called to make of his only beloved son. Jesus, who is the true beloved Son of the Father. And he is the Lamb of sacrifice from the book of Exodus that saves the Jewish people from the angel of death. The angel of death passes over, hence they get the name, passes over the house of the Jews that's marked with the blood of the Lamb, in which they've eaten the flesh, the roasted flesh of the sacrificed lamb. And so they are saved, and by this passing over the angel of death, delivered from Egypt. So we, by the sacrifice of Jesus, the only Son of God, so too does death pass over us, and we are freed from slavery to sin. So when you hear these words, "Behold the Lamb of God," at Mass, be reminded of that full scriptural historical weight and adore Jesus, the promised Lamb of God, who fulfills all the Father said he would do to Abraham, to Moses, throughout all of our Jewish forefathers and foremothers in the faith, and right down here to this day. I'm Father Andrew Dickinson at the Pius XII Catholic Newman Center. God bless you. Have a great week.